Hello, Broderick Wallace here, and I'm going to sneak this video, audio, whatever, in just before the upcoming Halloween interview, which you should not miss, of course. I assume I'm talking to about 5 people right now. Anyway, there's a story that I've wanted to tell on my channel, and it's never really quite appropriate. I've never really found the right places. It's never felt entirely correct, which is the reason I'm going to do it. Anyway, let's start with a piece of art, because I saw this piece of art online a couple of days ago or so, and I couldn't help but notice the synchronicity, you might say, with the channel. It's striking. And great artist. I don't usually go for the kind of digital art kind of thing, but every now and then you see some stuff and you're like, oh, you know, you've twisted my arm on this one. I'm impressed. So nice guy as well. Do check out his art. And while I was contemplating this piece and the synchronicity, it made me think about these strange resonances in life, and there's one going back years that I need to tell this story. It's too weird not to. And so let's take it back to teenage years. And where would I begin? I guess I'd begin with my little brother. I had a friend at school, and this friend of his, he was an unusual character, you know, a bit of a rogue, bit of a crazy guy, if you like, but we all were, right? But he come from a very alternative family, and my brother used to tell me stories about visiting his house, and you know, his mother was very alternative. She had dreadlocks and tattoos, and I think they used to, you know, smoke cannabis and all kinds of stuff. It was like this kid at school, my brother's friend, he had more freedom than the rest of us. So obviously my brother used to enjoy hanging out with him. So let's think of it. Well, obviously we'll change the name. So we'll just call this guy my brother's friend Damien, just to pick a name at random. And you know how when you're at school, when you're young, a year is a long time. Obviously we know that time speeds up as you get older. So the kids in this is senior school, by the way, must have been about, I don't know, 13, 14 or something. Anyway, so the kids in the year above and below, it was an all boys school, by the way. So the lads in the year above and below, there was a big gap in mentality. It was like you didn't really mix. You wouldn't usually become friends with someone that's not in your year, your year group. But for some reason, me and Damien became friends just for a week or so. We started hanging out, and so he gave the same invite to me that my brother had experienced. So, oh, come round to the house, we'll have a sleepover and play computer games and all this kind of stuff. So obviously I was quite fascinated by the stories that I'd heard of this very liberal family and this this interesting household. So I took him up on this, and if I remember rightly, I was picked up by Damien's mum, the lady with the dreadlocks and the tattoos and everything, and her boyfriend was driving, and he was similar, like dreadlocks, tattoos, and they were talking as we were being driven to the house. They were talking about this group that they belonged to. It was the topic of discussion, the internal politics or whatever was going on. But I'll save the name of this group till later, so I'll build it up as like a climax. So I get to the house, get into Damien's bedroom, and the idea was that we'd play computer games. But what actually happened was I was just watching him play Super Mario all night. And this got a bit boring. At one point, I needed the loo. Damien, where's the toilet? Oh, go down, second door on the left or whatever. And it's late and it's dark. And this house, it felt big to me, to memory. It was imposing because of its reputation, and I could hear strange music emanating in the distance in the dark from a different corner of this house. And it was kind of shut off, because watching Damien play computer games, it was sort of separate from the rest of the house. There was a separation there. So as I left the room, and obviously he's jangling away on his joystick, I walked into the darkness, this really long corridor, and obviously you feel really far from home, and when you're sleeping around a mate's house, it makes you feel further from home and safety. So this strange music in the house grew louder. This rave music, whatever it was. Obviously, bear in mind this is the early 90s, I think. So so being a teenager, being a bit useless, I got the wrong door, didn't I? So I opened the door where the music was coming from, and in the darkness, all of a sudden, my sight was obviously filled with, basically, the room was filled with flashing multicolored lights. And you imagine the music blasting, and there was a guy also with dreadlocks, sat cross-legged on the floor in the room. And I'm just guessing that it probably stunk of cannabis. He looked like he was stoned out of his mind on acid. He looked up, our eyes met, and I was like, sorry, just close the door. Back to the darkness, the music's thumping. Found the right room, did what I had to do, and then returned, obviously, back to Damien's bedroom to watch him play Super Mario until we both just, collapsed and went to sleep. And was driven back home by Damien's mum and the boyfriend. Again, same situation. And the discussion continued about this, the internal politics of this group that they belong to. Go forward about a year, and something strange happened. Something very, I say strange. It was. I kind of pause here because it's hard to find the right words. I want to handle this as quickly as possible. This aspect, and that is, me and my brother were due to be ejected into care. Obviously, there's a whole backstory to this, but that's not appropriate for the channel. So I went off into care, and my brother, just before he was due to go to a foster family, because he was a year younger than me, it fell under some kind of jurisdiction or something. And Damien's mum said, no, I will not see that happen. I will adopt, obviously, my little brother. And I remember, I didn't think it, but I can remember feeling it, like, oh, he got rescued. It was kind of disappointing to me. So he went off to live with this bohemian, liberal family with their cannabis and raving and strange people. And I would talk to my brother from time to time on the phone, and he would tell me, and he would describe Damien's mum's friends that would come around to the house, and some of them had unusual sort of, hippie sounding names and this kind of stuff. And I remember he always used to talk about Paul and Jen. He'd mention that a lot. Oh, Paul and Jen come round and we went to this rave, or we did this. And I remember I was living maybe a couple of years later or whatever, or who knows. I was living in a bedsit, about a year later, and my little brother just turned up at the window, just armed to the teeth with all kinds of drugs. Now, of course, I will stress on the channel, this is not something that not something, I wouldn't say I don't support, I wouldn't say I'm against it, but like, it's not part of Hermetic practice, and it's never been something that's ever truly stuck with me. I obviously experimented when I was younger and took ayahuasca in adulthood, and I always found just the grimy feeling that it would leave in my life. Drugs never really stuck with me, and I can't ever imagine myself doing them again. But some people they can do it. I always found cannabis, like, the extreme examination of, put it this way, if you have a mind that picks things apart and is very intuitive and notices things and examines things, I found that this went into overload if I was in any kind of social situation. It was great for, playing guitar in my room or whatever, but not for me. Anyway, but back in the day, obviously my brother turns up at my bedsit, like I said, armed to the teeth with all kinds of extreme drugs, and we got high together, and he's obviously talking about his adventures living, with Damien's mum and, boyfriend and the whole friend group and all this kind of stuff. And I remember there was one phone call I had from my brother where he was like, the house has been raided. It's like, what? Yeah, there was I don't know whether it was a drugs raid but it was obviously the police were looking for something, and I think this was shortly. It kind of led to a change of address, and eventually he would leave that household. And I remember he told me one story one day. He said he got up in the morning, opened up the cupboards in this house. It was in Brighton, by the way. And he wanted some cereal, so he picked the cereal box off the shelf, went to pour it in the bowl, and he poured a mouse into his cereal bowl. So that sticks out as a little anecdote there. Anyway, so this this house that got raided in Brighton, just something. Who knows? There might be someone listening so far who's putting two and two together here, because we will fast forward to a few years down the line. I think I was in my early 20s, and I'm in a bookshop, and I was reading a disinformation book, if you remember those, disinformation, that whatever it was in the occults and publications or whatever. And things start to click, and I, on my mobile phone, which were kind of new at the time, these these ancient mobile phones when I was in my early 20s, like a brick or whatever, I think it was a Nokia, called him up and said the flat got raided, right? Yeah. Paul and Jen. Yep. And then I mentioned the name of the group that Damien's mum and her boyfriend were discussing, which was the Temple of Psychic Youth. And I'm like, fucking hell, man. I'm reading about this in the bookshop, this occult book, and I thought this is now. Obviously, I knew previously that they belonged to the Temple of Psychic Youth, and I always used to think how odd that was. You see, my brother doesn't care about any of this stuff. He's not into the subject. He's not interested. If I say he's not an intellectual, I don't mean that in a snobbish way. It's just, I'm not saying that I am, but you'll know what I mean if I say that. He's the kind of lad that just likes lads things, right? So I thought, how ironic. There's my brother living. Basically, my little brother was adopted by, to all intents and purposes, the Temple of Psychic Youth, and was there the day living in the house in the flat that was raided for the. Now, I haven't looked this up before I'm recording this because I want to keep the story pure, but I believe it was a sex magic tape or something like this. So how crazy is that? And I thought, God, like how close I was, considering that I'm really into all this stuff. And obviously you go through stages over the years, but eventually you become, permanent. This becomes your main focus in life, this subject in some fashion or another. So God, there's my brother, adopted by the Temple of Psychic Youth. I'm literally reading in this book in Waterstones from the Mind, Body and Spirit section about the raid on the flat, and he was there when it happened, and he just doesn't care. I thought, God, like there's me, reading Crowley and trying to piece things together in the days, pretty much before the internet was, worth looking at. And so in that way that he just wasn't interested, he dropped this on the phone call. He dropped this really funny statement, actually. And just in case anyone's listening that's connected to that world or whatever. And obviously Paul and Jen, that's I can't remember if I mentioned it, but obviously Genesis Peorage. So I will trust that you are mature enough to find this as funny as I do, considering that I do take these subjects seriously. And I said, how cool was it to think that you were living with these guys? And I'm literally reading about this, and you were there. And I said, this is amazing. And, it must have been so cool living with these people. And obviously I imagined myself, being adopted by occultists, and how that would have, changed my life, and I would have had access to more information earlier, and all these things going through my head. And my little brother said on the phone call, he said, you know what? He said, there are a bunch of hippies that think they can change the world, but they won't, because all they ever do is sit around smoking dope all day. Now, this story, it's funny. The punchline is funny, but think about it. This lady, Damien's mum from the Temple of Psychic Youth, cared more about my little brother's well-being than, well, fill in the blank, yeah? That's something to think about. So how strange is life? Okay, we're talking, I guess it's going to be tomorrow night after midnight. I shall upload the Halloween exclusive, and I shall see you there. Good night, God bless, and take care.